They say money talks, but on Cloud Air Flight 402 it was about to scream. When 19-year-old Maya sat down in seat 1A, wearing a faded hoodie and old sneakers, flight attendant Karenna saw an easy target. She saw a stowaway. She saw someone who didn't belong. She didn't see the daughter of the man who owned the very ground the plane was parked on. Karenna thought she could bully a teenager into economy to make room for a VIP. She was wrong. Dead wrong. Because in 10 minutes, a $1 billion private jet is going to blockade the runway, and Karenna is about to learn that some passengers aren't just wealthy, they are untouchable. Watch until the end, because the karma that hits this flight crew is absolutely nuclear. The cabin of the Boeing 737-300ER smelled of recycled air, expensive sanitizer, and the faint, crisp scent of fresh champagne. It was the smell of exclusivity. In the first-class cabin, there were only 8 suites. These weren't just seats. They were private sanctuaries with sliding doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch 4K screens. Passengers here didn't just walk, they glided. They wore Italian loafers, bespoke suits from Savile Row, and watches that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. And then there was Maya. Maya Sterling, 19 years old, shuffled down the aisle clutching a worn-out leather backpack that looked like it had survived a war zone. She wore oversized grey sweatpants, a black hoodie with a bleach stain on the cuff, and bulky, noise-cancelling headphones resting around her neck. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, frizzing slightly at the temples. She stopped at Suite 1A, the most coveted spot on the plane. Standing near the galley, head flight attendant Karenna narrowed her eyes. Karenna prided herself on being the gatekeeper of luxury. She had been flying for 20 years. She could spot new money versus old money from 50 feet away. She could spot a fake Rolex by the way the light hit the bezel. And looking at Maya, Karenna didn't see money at all. She saw a mistake. She saw a glitch in her perfect ecosystem. "Excuse me." Karenna's voice was sugary, but with a hard, metallic edge. She stepped into the aisle, blocking Maya's path just as the girl reached for the overhead bin. "Boarding passes are checked at the door, but I think you might be confused. Economy boarding is through the second bridge, back that way." She pointed a manicured finger toward the rear of the plane, not even looking Maya in the eye. Maya paused, her hand hovering over the latch of the bin. She looked tired. It had been a long week at a medical internship in the Bronx, a program her father insisted she do anonymously to build character. She just wanted to sleep. "I'm not confused," Maya said softly, her voice raspy. "I'm in 1A. Karenna let out a short, incredulous puff of air, a laugh disguised as a cough. She looked at the passengers already seated. In 2A sat Mr. Roger Thorne, a hedge fund manager who was currently glaring at Maya over the top of his Financial Times. Thorne was a Diamond Key member, the kind of man who complained if his scotch was 2 degrees too warm. "Miss," Karenna said, stepping closer, invading Maya's personal space. "This is first class. These suites cost $12,000 one way. Now, I don't know how you slipped past the gate agents, but we are on a tight schedule. I need you to move to your assigned seat in row 40 or 50 immediately." Maya didn't budge. She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out a crumpled boarding pass, and held it up. "Maya Sterling, seat 1A," Maya read. "It's right here." Karenna snatched the pass from her hand. She stared at it. It looked real. The heavy cardstock, the gold foil strip that indicated full fare first. But Karenna's mind was already made up. Her bias was a concrete wall. A girl looking like that, black, disheveled, young, didn't buy full-fare international first-class tickets. "Computers make mistakes," Karenna sneered, handing the ticket back as if it were contaminated. "Or perhaps you found this. Or printed it yourself? Regardless, we have a situation. The only situation, Maya said, her patience thinning, is that you're blocking me from my seat. The situation, a booming voice came from behind them, is that some of us pay for exclusivity, not a charity ward. It was Roger Thorne in 2A. He snapped his newspaper shut. Stewardess, is this child going to be here the whole flight? I have a merger to review. I cannot have urban noise. Karena's spine straightened. This was her cue. She had to protect the real customers. Don't worry, Mr. Thorne, Karena said, flashing him a professional smile. She turned back to Maya, her face dropping into a scowl. Come with me. We're going to sort this out in the galley. You aren't sitting here. Maya stood her ground. I paid for this seat. I'm sitting in it. She tossed her backpack into the bin and sat down. The leather crunched softly under her weight. She buckled the seatbelt, the metallic click echoing in the silent cabin. Karena's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed with her cloud air scarf. She marched to the flight deck phone and buzzed the cockpit, but then she had a better idea. She walked back to Maya, leaning over the suite wall. Listen to me, Karena hissed, her voice low so the others wouldn't hear the venom. I know what you're doing. You used miles, right? Or maybe an employee pass from a relative who cleans the bathrooms at the terminal. Here's the reality check. We are overbooked. That's not my problem, Maya said, putting her headphones over her ears. Karena reached out and physically pulled the headphones off Maya's head. Maya flinched, shock registering in her eyes. Don't touch me. I need your attention, Karena snapped. We have a VIP on standby, a Platinum Global member who actually pays full price. I have the authority to reassign seats for the comfort and safety of the cabin. I am downgrading you. There is a middle seat in row 34. You will take it, and I will issue you a travel voucher for the difference. Now get up. I didn't use miles, Maya said, her voice trembling slightly with anger. And I don't want a voucher. I want to go to Zurich. You are disrupting this flight, Roger Thorne shouted from 2A. Get the little delinquent off the plane. Call the air marshal. I'm giving you 5 seconds, Karena said, crossing her arms. Move to economy, or I call the airport police and have you removed for failing to comply with crew instructions. That's a federal offense, sweetie. You want a criminal record before you're 20. Maya looked around the cabin. A few passengers looked uncomfortable, looking down at their phones. One man in 3A, a younger guy named Ethan, looked like he wanted to say something, but was intimidated by Thorne's outburst. You're making a mistake, Maya said, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. A very big, very expensive mistake. The only mistake was letting you on board, Karena retorted. She flagged down a junior flight attendant. Jessica, grab her bag from the bin. Take it to row 34. No! Maya lunged to grab her bag, but Karena blocked her, shoving Maya back into the seat with a stiff arm. It was a physical assault. It was slight, but it was there. Maya froze. She looked at Karena's hand on her shoulder. You just put your hands on a passenger, Maya whispered. I'm securing the cabin, Karena lied smoothly. Now move. Mr. Thorne's associate is waiting at the gate for this seat. Maya took a deep breath. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. It was a customized iPhone, the back casing made of matte black titanium, a prototype not even on the market yet. I'm making a call, Maya said. Phone's off. Doors are about to close, Karena yelled. You haven't closed the doors yet, Maya noted, glancing at the open boarding door. So I'm making a call. She dialed a single speed dial number. It rang once. Daddy? Maya said into the phone. Karena rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. Oh, great. She's calling Daddy. What's he going to do? Come yell at me in his minivan? Roger Thorne chuckled, probably asking for bail money in advance. On the other end of the line, the voice was deep, calm, and sounded like tectonic plates shifting. Maya? You're supposed to be wheels up. Is everything okay? No, Maya said, staring directly into Karena's eyes. The head stewardess, Karena. She just shoved me. She's kicking me out of my seat because she says I don't belong in first class. She took my headphones. She's moving me to row 34 so her friend can sit here. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure in the cabin dropped. She touched you? The voice was no longer calm. It was cold. Absolute zero. Yes, she pushed me. Put her on, the voice commanded. Maya held the phone out to Karena. He wants to talk to you. Karena scoffed. I am not talking to your father. I have a job to do. Just take the phone, Maya said. Please. Before this gets worse for you. Karena snatched the phone, intending to hang it up, but she put it to her ear out of spite, ready to dress down the parent. Listen to me, sir. Your daughter is causing a disturbance. She is dressed inappropriately for this cabin, she is aggressive, and she refuses to follow crew instructions. I am moving her to economy. If you have a problem with that, you can file a complaint on our website that I will personally delete. What is your name? The voice on the phone asked. It wasn't a shout. It was a low rumble, clear and authoritative. This is Senior Purser Karena Mills. And who is this? My name is Julian Sterling, the voice said, and you are currently standing on my property. Karena paused. The name Sterling rang a bell, but she couldn't place it. Maybe a minor celebrity? Look, Mr. Sterling, I don't care if you're the mayor of New York. Your daughter moves or she gets arrested. Those are the options. Goodbye. Karena hung up. She threw the phone back into Maya's lap. That's it. Karena signaled to the gate agent who had just walked in. Remove her. Use force if you have to. Thorne's associate is waiting. 2 large men from ground security entered. They weren't police, but they were large enough to be intimidating. Miss, you need to come with us, one of them said, reaching for Maya's arm. Maya stood up, shrugging off his hand. Fine, I'll get off. But I'm not going to economy. I'm waiting right outside on the tarmac. You can't wait on the tarmac. That's a restricted zone, the security guard grunted. Trust me, Maya said, adjusting her hoodie. You're going to want me out there. Maya grabbed her backpack. She walked past Karena, stopping for just a second. You should have checked the passenger manifest more carefully, Karena. Specifically, the middle name. Maya walked off the plane. Karena smirked, turning to Roger Thorne. Trash taken out. Let's get your associate on board and get some champagne flowing. The cabin door closed. The jet bridge retracted. Karena felt a surge of victory. She had protected the sanctity of first class. She walked to the cockpit. Captain Miller, cabin is secure. Problem passenger removed. We are ready for pushback. Copy that, Captain Miller said, requesting pushback clearance from the tower. The massive engines of the Boeing 777 hummed to life. The plane shuddered and began to roll backward. Karena began prepping the hot towels. She thought the drama was over. She didn't know that 3 miles away, in a private hangar known as the Citadel, a hangar door the size of a football field was opening, and inside, something akin to a dragon was waking up. The Boeing 777 taxied slowly toward runway 4 left. It was a busy evening at JFK. Planes were lined up like ducks. Inside the cockpit, Captain Miller frowned. Tower, Cloud Air 402. We've been holding at taxiway Juliet for 5 minutes. What's the delay? The radio crackled. The air traffic controller sounded confused, panicked even. Cloud Air 402, hold position immediately. Do not, I repeat, do not cross the intersection. What's the problem, Tower? We have a slot to keep. We have an unauthorized vehicle entering the active taxiway. My God, it's a jet. A jet? Miller looked out the side window. What kind of jet? I don't know, the controller stammered. It didn't request clearance. It just rolled out of the private sector. It's blocking the entire queue. Back in first class, Roger Thorne was sipping his champagne. Finally some peace, he muttered to his associate, who had taken Myers' seat. Suddenly the plane slammed on its brakes. Champagne flutes tipped over. Thorne spilled his drink on his Italian trousers. "What the hell is going on?" he yelled. Karenna unbuckled and ran to the window. She looked out onto the tarmac. Her eyes went wide. Perpendicular to their nose, blocking the only path to the runway, sat a beast of a machine. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, the largest and longest-range business jet in the world. But this wasn't a normal rental. It was painted matte black, absorbing the airport floodlights. There were no commercial logos, just a tail number in gold leaf, N1STR. The engines of the black jet weren't spooling up for takeoff. They were idling. It had parked, sideways, directly in front of the Cloud Air flight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom, sounding shaken. We have a situation. A private aircraft has just blocked our path. We are waiting for ground control to move them." But the black jet didn't move. Instead, a fleet of 4 black Cadillac Escalades tore across the tarmac, ignoring all safety protocols. Blue and red lights flashed in the grille. Not police, but private security with high-level clearance. They swarmed the Cloud Air plane. Karenna felt a pit open in her stomach. She looked down at the tarmac. Standing by the landing gear of the massive black jet was Maya. She was still wearing her hoodie. She was leaning against the landing gear, looking at her phone. And next to her, stepping out of the lead Escalade, was a man. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Karenna's annual salary. He didn't look angry. He looked like an executioner who had already signed the warrant. It was Julian Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Aerosystems, the man who supplied the navigation software for half the planes at JFK, the man who owned the private terminal. And he was walking toward the mobile stairs that were being pushed up to the Cloud Air plane by his own ground crew. "Captain," the radio blared, "this is the tower. You are ordered to open your main cabin door. Security clearance is overridden. You have a pissed-off billionaire out there, and he says you have his property." "We removed the passenger," Captain Miller argued. "Not the passenger," the tower replied. "He says you have his daughter's luggage, and he wants a word with the crew." Karenna's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a seat to steady herself. The knock on the main cabin door wasn't a polite tap. It was a heavy, rhythmic pounding. Roger Thorne looked out the window and went pale. Is that Julian Sterling, the guy who just bought the airline's debt?" Karenna looked at Thorne. "What?" "That guy outside," Thorne whispered, terror dawning on his face. "He owns the holding company that just bailed out Cloud Air last week. He's the majority shareholder." The cabin door opened. The cold wind from the tarmac rushed in. Julian Sterling stepped onto the plane. He didn't look at the captain. He didn't look at the passengers. He looked straight at Karenna. The silence inside the cabin of Cloud Air Flight 402 was absolute. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or bomb defusal squads. Julian Sterling stood in the galley entrance. He didn't scream. He didn't throw things. He simply existed in the space, sucking the oxygen out of the room. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, engraved with the Sterling family crest, and looked down at Karenna Mills. Karenna, who had been a tyrant just 5 minutes ago, now looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. She tried to muster her professional facade, the one she used to intimidate junior crew members and economy passengers. "Sir," Karena's voice wavered, cracking in the middle. "You cannot be on this aircraft. This is a secure environment. I'm going to have to ask you to—" "You don't ask me anything," Julian interrupted. His voice was soft, smooth, and terrifying. "You answer. My daughter, Maya. She was seated in 1A. Where is her luggage?" Karena swallowed hard. She pointed toward the rear of the plane. We moved it to row 34 to facilitate a seat swap." "A seat swap," Julian repeated, tasting the words like sour milk. He took a step closer. He towered over her. "Did she volunteer for this swap?" "It was an operational necessity," Karena lied, her eyes darting to the captain for support. Captain Miller stepped out of the cockpit, hat in hand. He looked pale. He had just Googled the tail number of the black jet blocking his path. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Captain Miller. I apologize for the delay. We were told the passenger was disruptive. My chief purser informed me she was a stowaway risk." Julian slowly turned his head to look at the captain. "A stowaway risk? My daughter?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a Cloudair Obsidian partner card. There were only 10 of them in existence, usually held by heads of state or the owners of the airline's major investors. "I purchased that ticket," Julian said, holding the card up. "Full fare, plus a $50,000 donation to your airline's carbon offset program, made in her name just this morning. Does that sound like a stowaway to you?" Captain Miller turned to Karena. His face went from confused to furious. "Karena, you told me she had a fake ticket." It looked fake," Karena stammered, backing up until she hit the galley counter. "She was wearing a hoodie. She had dirty sneakers. She didn't look like she belonged here. We have standards, Captain." "Standards," Julian mused. He walked past her, stepping into the first-class aisle. The passengers were frozen. Roger Thorne in 2A was holding a menu up, trying to hide his face. Julian stopped at row 2. He reached out and pulled the menu down from Thorne's hands. "Mr. Thorne," Julian said. "Roger, isn't it?" Roger Thorne forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "Mr. Sterling, Julian, good to see you. I had no idea that was your girl. Honestly, if you had known she was a Sterling, you would have treated her with respect," Julian finished for him. "But because you thought she was a nobody, you treated her like trash." "She was being loud," Roger lied, sweat beading on his forehead. "She was aggressive." "I have the audio," Julian said simply. The cabin gasped. "Maya's phone records everything when she feels threatened," Julian explained, his eyes scanning the cabin. "I listened to the recording on my way across the tarmac. She wasn't loud. She wasn't aggressive. She was polite. You, Roger, called her a delinquent. You called her urban noise." Roger Thorne turned the color of ash. Julian turned back to Karena. "And you touched her." Karena shook her head frantically. "I just guided her. I didn't—" "You grabbed her shoulder," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave. "You ripped her headphones off her head. That is assault, and on federal property, that's a felony." "I was doing my job," Karena shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "She didn't fit the profile. Look at this cabin. It's for elite travelers. I have spent 20 years keeping this cabin perfect. I was protecting the brand." "You are the brand damage," Julian said. "And you're finished." The atmosphere inside the first-class cabin of Cloudair Flight 402 had shifted from awkward tension to a suffocating, heavy dread. The air conditioning was humming, but everyone was sweating. Julian Sterling didn't shout. He didn't pace. He simply stood in the center of the aisle, a monolith of expensive tailoring and absolute authority. He held his phone, a prototype device with no brand markings, just a sleek slab of matte black glass, and tapped the screen once. He wasn't calling the police. He wasn't calling a lawyer. He was calling the only person on the planet who could authorize what was about to happen next. The large monitor on the bulkhead, usually reserved for the flight map or safety videos, suddenly flickered. Julian had wirelessly cast his phone screen to the cabin's main display. A video call connected instantly. The face that appeared in 4K resolution was familiar to everyone in the aviation industry. It was David Henderson, the global CEO of Cloud Air. He was sitting in his home office in Connecticut, looking disheveled, a headset pressed to his ear, his eyes wide with panic. "Julian?" Henderson's voice boomed through the cabin speakers, tinny but unmistakable. "Is that you? My operations control center is in a total meltdown. The tower at JFK says a Global 7500, tail number November 1 Sierra Tango Romeo, is parked sideways across taxiway Juliet. They're saying it's your jet. You've shut down the entire outbound bank of flights. The Port Authority is threatening to send a SWAT team." "Let them come, David," Julian said, his voice smooth, calm, and terrifyingly level. "They can tow the jet if they want. It's insured. But by the time they move it, your airline's stock price will have dropped 15% in after-hours trading." "Julian, what is going on?" Henderson pleaded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You're a majority shareholder. You're tanking your own investment." "I'm protecting a more important investment," Julian replied. He stepped aside, angling his phone's camera and the feed on the big screen to capture Karenna Mills. Karenna was pressed against the galley wall, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. Her hands were shaking so badly she had dropped a bottle of sparkling water, which was now fizzing into the carpet, ignored. "This is your senior purser, Miss Mills." Julian introduced her like she was a specimen in a jar. And 10 minutes ago, under the guise of protecting the brand, she physically assaulted a 19-year-old girl. She racially profiled her. She stole her property. And she forcibly evicted her from a seat that I paid $12,000 for. That's a serious accusation," Henderson stammered. "It's not an accusation," Julian corrected. "It's a documented fact." Julian tapped his screen again. The video feed on the wall split. On the left was Henderson's terrified face. On the right, a video began to play. It was the footage from Maya's phone, recorded automatically when her heart rate spiked, a safety feature Julian had insisted on. The entire cabin watched in high definition. They saw the angle from Maya's lap. They heard Karenna's sneering voice. "I don't know how you slipped past the gate agents. Come with me. You aren't sitting here." Then came the physical escalation. The camera jerked violently as Karenna grabbed the headphones. The audio picked up the wet slap of skin on skin as she shoved Maya back into the leather seat. "You just put your hands on a passenger," Maya's recorded voice whispered, trembling. "I am securing the cabin," Karenna's recorded voice lied. The video ended. The cabin was silent. "That," Julian said, turning back to the live feed of the CEO, "is assault and battery. It is a violation of federal aviation regulations. And David, it is a personal insult to my family. That girl she threw into economy? That's Maya. My daughter." On the screen, David Henderson's face drained of all color. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. Oh my God, Julian, I didn't know." "Ms. Mills didn't know either," Julian said, "because she didn't bother to check. She saw a skin color she didn't respect and a hoodie she didn't like, and she decided to play God." "Mr. Henderson, please." Karenna finally found her voice, stepping forward, hands clasped in a begging gesture toward the screen. "I was following protocol. The passenger looked suspicious. We have to be vigilant. I have given 20 years of my life to this airline. You know me. I'm Employee of the Month." You were, Julian interjected coldly. Julian, Henderson said, his voice hardening as he looked at his employee. What do you want? I'll authorize a full refund. I'll give her a lifetime pass. I'll have the board issue a formal apology. I don't want your passes, David. I own 3 jets, Julian said, dismissing the offer with a wave of his hand. I want the cancer cut out. Name it, Henderson said. I want the runway cleared, Julian said. But my pilot has strict orders. The Global 7500 does not move 1 inch until 2 specific individuals are removed from this aircraft and banned from Cloud Air for life. Done, Henderson said instantly. Who are they? First, Ms. Mills. Julian pointed a finger at her. For assault, discrimination, and gross negligence. She's fired, Henderson said. The words echoed through the cabin speakers. Karenna, hand over your badge. You are relieved of duty effective immediately. You are not to fly as crew on my airline ever again. Karenna gasped, a sound like a dying engine. David, you can't. My pension. I'm 2 years away from full benefits. You forfeited your pension when you assaulted a passenger, Henderson said, his voice cold. Captain Miller? Are you there? Captain Miller stepped into the frame, looking grim. I'm here, sir. Escort Ms. Mills off the aircraft. If she resists, have the Port Authority arrest her for trespassing. No, this isn't fair, Karenna screamed, looking around for an ally. She looked at Roger Thorne in seat 2A. Mr. Thorne, tell them! I was doing it for you! You said she was loud. You said she was urban noise. Julian turned his gaze slowly toward Roger Thorne. Thorne was trying to shrink into his seat, using the laminated safety card to shield his face. But there was nowhere to hide. Ah, yes. The second individual, Julian said to the screen. Mr. Roger Thorne in seat 2A, the man who instigated the removal, the man who referred to my daughter as a delinquent because she was wearing sweatpants. Roger Thorne slammed the safety card down. His arrogance, fueled by fear, flared up one last time. Now hold on a minute, Sterling. You can fire the help, but you can't kick me off. I am a paying customer. I am a Diamond Medallion member. I run Thorne Capital. I manage billions. Julian smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Thorne Capital, Julian mused, tapping his chin. That's a hedge fund specializing in distressed assets, isn't it? Highly leveraged. Very aggressive. I know my business, Thorne snapped, standing up to face Julian. And I know my rights. If you try to remove me, I will sue you. I will sue this airline, and I will sue you, Henderson. I will tie you up in court for a decade. David, Julian said to the screen, ignoring Thorne completely. Do you have the passenger manifest handy? I do, Henderson replied. Check the payment method for Mr. Thorne's ticket. One moment. Okay. It was purchased using a corporate Amex, linked to Thorne Capital Holdings. Excellent, Julian said. He turned to Thorne. Roger, do you check your emails on the weekend? Or were you too busy drinking champagne? What are you talking about? Thorne demanded, his voice wavering slightly. Because if you checked your email, Julian continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, you would have seen a notification from your chief financial officer about 20 minutes ago. You see, Thorne Capital has a liquidity bridge loan of $300 million. It was up for renewal next week. Thorne went pale. That's private financial information. It was, Julian corrected, until this morning, when the bank that held your loan sold the debt package to Sterling Private Equity. The silence in the cabin was so profound you could hear the ice melting in the untouched drinks. I own your debt, Roger, Julian said, stepping closer, looming over the smaller man. And in the fine print of that loan agreement, there is a bad actor clause. Clause 14b. It states that if the principal officer of the borrowing firm engages in conduct that damages the reputation of the lender has the right to call in the full amount of the loan immediately. You wouldn't, Thorne whispered. That would bankrupt the firm. We don't have the cash. I already did, Julian said softly. I executed the call option while I was walking up the jet bridge. Your accounts are frozen, Roger. Your corporate card, the one you used to buy this seat? It's been declined. Retroactively. Julian turned back to the captain. Captain Miller, does Cloud Air allow passengers to fly on invalid tickets paid for with declined credit cards? Captain Miller shook his head, a look of pure disdain on his face as he looked at Thorne. No, sir. That would be theft of service. There you go, Julian said, spreading his hands. He's not a passenger. He's a trespasser. Thorne collapsed back into his seat, his legs giving out. He looked at his phone. He had 5 missed calls from his CFO. A text message on the screen read, "They froze the accounts. What did you do?" "Get them off," Julian ordered. The spell broke. Captain Miller nodded to the 2 large security guards who had originally come to drag Meyer away. "Gentlemen," Miller barked, "remove Ms. Mills and Mr. Thorne from the aircraft. Immediately." "No, wait!" Karenna wailed as a guard grabbed her arm. She twisted, desperate, her eyes wild. "I can fix this. I can apologize. Let me go get her. I'll carry her bags. Don't you dare go near her," Julian warned, his voice like a whip crack. The guard pulled Karenna toward the door. In her struggle, she snagged her scarf, the silk Cloud Air scarf she had worn so proudly, on the armrest. It ripped with a loud tearing sound, leaving her uniform disheveled, a physical symbol of her career shredding apart. Thorne didn't struggle. He was in shock. He walked like a zombie, the security guard guiding him by the elbow. As he passed Julian, he looked up, eyes hollow. "I'm ruined," Thorne whispered. "You were ruined the moment you thought your money made you better than a child," Julian said. "Now you're just broke." As the 2 antagonists were hauled off the jet bridge into the waiting arms of the Port Authority police who had gathered on the tarmac, the remaining passengers in first class let out a collective breath. One passenger, the young man in 3A named Ethan, started to clap. Slowly at first, then louder. Then the woman across the aisle joined in. Even the economy passengers, who were craning their necks to see through the curtains, started cheering. Julian didn't bow. He didn't acknowledge the applause. He wasn't doing this for an audience. He turned to Captain Miller. "My pilot will move the jet in 5 minutes. You're free to go to Zurich, Captain. Try to hire better people next time." "We will, Mr. Sterling," Miller said, looking humbled. "And I am truly sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Julian said, turning his back on the cockpit. "I'm going to get my daughter." Julian walked down the long aisle of the plane, past the empty first-class seats, past the curtains, into the economy cabin. Hundreds of eyes watched him. He looked out of place in his bespoke suit among the cramped rows. But he walked with a purpose. He reached row 34, the middle seat where Karenna had ordered Meyer's bag to be dumped. The backpack was there, sitting forlornly on the cheap fabric. It was old, scratched leather, covered in keychains from places Meyer had visited. It looked like nothing special, but to Julian, it was precious. He picked it up gently, dusting off a crumb from the seat. "Excuse me," a woman in the aisle seat whispered. "Is she okay? Your daughter?" Julian looked at the woman. She looked worried. Genuine concern. "She will be," Julian said, his expression softening for the first time in 20 minutes. "She's strong. Stronger than any of them." He slung the battered backpack over one shoulder, a billionaire carrying a student's bag, and turned to leave. As he walked back toward the front, the phone in his pocket buzzed. It was a notification from his pilot. Engines spooling up. Ready for departure. Julian stepped off Cloud Air Flight 402 into the cold wind of the jet bridge. He didn't look back at the chaos he had caused. He didn't look back at the ruin of Roger Thorne or the tears of Karenna Mills. He only looked toward the black stairs of his own jet, where Maya was waiting, ready to take her home. Karma had been served, and it was time to fly. The wind on the tarmac at JFK was biting, carrying the smell of jet fuel and burnt rubber. It whipped around the massive landing gear of the Cloud Air Boeing 737, but Julian Sterling didn't feel the cold. He felt only the simmering heat of a father's protective rage, cooling into a satisfied, stony resolve. He walked down the metal stairs of the jet bridge, his Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the corrugated steel. Over his shoulder, he carried Maya's battered backpack, a cheap piece of canvas that held more value to him than the entire aircraft he had just exited. Behind him, the Cloud Air plane was in chaos. Above the roar of the wind, he could hear the raised voices of the Port Authority police and the shrill, desperate pleading of Karenna Mills. Julian didn't look back. He walked straight toward the beast waiting for him on the taxiway. The Bombardier Global 7500, painted in matte black, looked less like an airplane and more like a predator lying in wait. Its engines were already humming, a low-frequency vibration that shook the ground. The air stairs were deployed, bathed in soft amber LED lighting, a stark contrast to the harsh industrial floodlights of the airport. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was Maya. She was still wearing the oversized grey hoodie and the sweatpants that had caused so much offense. She looked small against the backdrop of the massive jets, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. But as she saw her father emerge from the shadows, her posture relaxed. "Did you fire everyone?" Maya asked, her voice slightly hoarse. "Only the ones who deserved it," Julian said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. He handed her the backpack. "I got your bag, and I believe you dropped this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out her headphones, the ones Karenna had ripped from her head. Maya took them, her fingers brushing the plastic. "Thanks, Dad." "Let's go home," Julian said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Zurich can wait an hour. We need to get you warm." They ascended the stairs of the private jet. As they stepped inside, the contrast was jarring. The Cloud Air cabin had been a place of tension, judgment, and artificial luxury. The cabin of the Sterling One was a sanctuary. The air smelled of sandalwood and fresh linen. The cabin was soundproofed to near silence. A flight attendant named Elena, who had known Maya since she was 6 years old, was waiting with a warm towel and a tray of hot chocolate, made with oat milk, exactly how Maya liked it. "Miss Maya," Elena said softly, her face filled with genuine concern, not the fake customer service smile of Karenna. "We saw the news alerts. Are you injured?" "I'm okay, Elena," Maya said, sinking into one of the club chairs. "Just tired." "We're wheels up in 2 minutes," the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice calm. "Traffic control has cleared a direct path for us. It seems they're eager to get us off their taxiway." As the door of the private jet hissed shut, sealing them in a cocoon of safety, the world outside began to crumble for the people they had left behind. 50 yards away, at the base of the Cloud Air jet bridge, the scene was anything but serene. Karenna Mills was being escorted down the stairs, not by a respectful crew, but by 2 Port Authority officers. The wind whipped her hair across her face, sticking to the tear tracks that had ruined her foundation. Her uniform, once her armor, was now disheveled. The scarf was gone. Her name tag hung crookedly. She saw the ground crew, the baggage handlers she had snapped at earlier that day, the fuel truck driver she had reported for being slow last week. They were all stopped, watching her. They weren't working. They were witnessing. "Please," Karenna sobbed, pulling against the officer's grip. "This is a mistake. I know the station manager. Call him. I just need to explain." "You can explain at the precinct, ma'am," the officer said, his voice bored. "We have statements from the captain, the CEO, and 3 passengers. Assault is a serious charge." "I didn't mean to hurt her," she wailed, the reality finally piercing her delusion. "I was just doing my job." "Your job is to serve drinks and ensure safety, not play bouncer," the officer muttered. As they walked her toward the flashing lights of the squad car, a young baggage handler held up his phone. He was recording. "Hey, Karenna," he shouted over the wind. "First class looks a little different from back here, doesn't it?" Karenna ducked her head, shame burning through her chest like acid. She knew, with a terrifying certainty, that her life as she knew it was over. The aviation industry was a small world. She was blacklisted. The pension she had slaved for was vaporized by the gross misconduct clause in her contract. She was 50 years old, with no savings, facing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit from a billionaire. She was shoved into the back of the police cruiser. The hard plastic seat was cold. Through the wire mesh of the window, she watched the black Global 7500 taxi past. It moved with grace and power, turning onto the runway she had tried to protect for the elite. She realized too late that she had been protecting the wrong people. If Karenna's fall was tragic, Roger Thorne's was catastrophic. He had been dumped inside the terminal by security, his luggage thrown onto the floor beside him. He wasn't arrested. Julian Sterling was smart enough to know that financial ruin hurt a man like Roger more than a night in jail. Roger stood in the middle of the busy concourse, straightening his suit jacket, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. People were staring. He looked like a madman, red-faced and panting. "I'll fix this," he muttered to himself. "I'll call the board. I'll explain it was a hostile takeover attempt. I'll sue Sterling for market manipulation." He reached for his phone to call his driver. He opened his Uber app. Account suspended, payment method invalid. He frowned. He tried his Lyft app. Payment declined. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his gut. He walked to a Hudson newsstand. He grabbed a bottle of water. His throat was parched from the screaming. He slapped his black Amex on the counter. The cashier, a bored teenager, swiped it. The machine beeped, a harsh red light. "Declined," the kid said. "Try it again," Roger snapped. "It's a black card. It has no limit." "It has a limit of 0 right now, buddy," the kid said, chewing gum. "Declined." Roger pulled out his Visa. Declined. His MasterCard. Declined. Julian Sterling hadn't just called in the corporate loan. He had triggered a forensic audit freeze on all assets linked to Roger's Social Security number. It was the nuclear option, reserved for suspected fraud or massive insolvency. Roger Thorne was, effectively, a ghost. His phone rang. It was his wife, Evelyn. "Roger," her voice was shrill. "Why are there men at the house? They say they're from the bank. They're taking the Range Rover. They're putting locks on the wine cellar." "Evelyn, listen to me," Roger stammered, sweat dripping down his nose. "Don't let them in. It's a mistake." "They have a court order, Roger. They say you're insolvent. They say Sterling Private Equity owns the deed to the house. What did you do? Roger, tell me right now. What did you do?" I got into an argument," Roger whispered, sinking onto his suitcase in the middle of the terminal. "You got into an argument?" Evelyn screamed. "With who?" "With a girl," Roger said, his voice breaking. "A girl in a hoodie." He looked up at the departure screens. Cloud Air Flight 402 was listed as departed. He was stranded at JFK. No money, no ride, no house to go back to. And as he sat there, a group of teenagers walked by. One of them pointed at him. "Hey, that's the guy from the video." The teen laughed. "The urban noise guy." "Yo, check it out," another kid yelled, holding up a phone. "You're trending on Twitter, man. What broke billionaire. You're a meme." Roger Thorne buried his head in his hands. The empire he had built on arrogance and debt had collapsed in under an hour, dismantled by a father who simply wanted his daughter to have a quiet flight. At 45,000 feet, the sky was a deep, bruised purple, transitioning into the black of space. The Sterling 1 was cruising smoothly at Mach 090, faster than any commercial jet. Maya had finished her hot chocolate. She was curled up under a cashmere blanket, watching the clouds streak by. Julian sat across from her, reviewing a document on his tablet, the finalized acquisition of Thorne Capital's assets. He signed it with a tap of his finger, effectively erasing Roger Thorne's career, then turned off the device. "You went overboard," Maya said quietly, not looking away from the window. "I did," Julian admitted. "Do you want me to apologize?" Maya turned to look at him. Her eyes, usually so sharp and guarded, were soft. "No. I want to know why you let me do it." "Let you do what?" "Travel like that," Maya said, gesturing to her stained hoodie. "You let me fly commercial. You let me work that internship in the Bronx under a fake name. You let me take the subway. You could have just given me the jet." Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maya, I built this company from nothing. My father was a mechanic. I know what the world looks like from the bottom. But you were born at the top." He paused, pouring himself a glass of water. "If I raised you in this bubble," he gestured around the luxurious cabin, "you would end up like Roger Thorne. You would think you're better than everyone else because of a number in a bank account. I wanted you to see the world as it really is. I wanted you to know how it feels to be invisible, to be judged." "Well, it worked," Maya said dryly. "I felt judged." "And how did you handle it?" Julian asked intently. "Did you scream? Did you throw a tantrum? Did you use my name?" "No," Maya said. "I stated the facts. I stood my ground. I waited." "Exactly." Julian smiled, a look of immense pride crossing his face. "You acted with dignity when they acted with cruelty. That is why you are going to run this company one day. Because you know the value of a person isn't on their ticket." Maya smiled back. It was a moment of perfect understanding between them. The trauma of the last hour faded, replaced by the deep, unshakable bond of family. "Dad? Yeah, kiddo? Next time, can I just take the jet? The hot chocolate is better." Julian laughed, a rich, booming sound that filled the cabin. "Yeah. Next time, take the jet. I think you've built enough character for one lifetime." He stood up and walked to the window, standing beside her. Together they looked down at the world below, a world of chaos, noise, and people like Karenna and Roger fighting for scraps of status. But up here, in the silence of the stratosphere, everything was clear. Justice had been served, the balances had been settled, and the Sterling family was flying on. What a satisfying ending. It truly proves that money can buy a first-class ticket, but it cannot buy class, dignity, or character. Karenna Mills lost her career because she couldn't see past her own prejudices, and Roger Thorne lost his entire empire because he thought he could bully a nobody. They learned the hard way that when you try to crush someone you think is weak, you might just be waking up a sleeping giant. Maya proved that true strength is staying calm in the face of disrespect, and Julian showed us the ultimate Papa Bear energy, using his power not to bully, but to protect. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of hard karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the algorithm show this story to more people. Make sure to share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new drama. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Julian went too far by bankrupting Roger, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.